To all my crypto lovers out there, this episode is for you. Welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, where today I'm joined with Nico. Nico, a heavy investor in crypto, is going to be sharing his story of entrepreneurship, leaving the corporate world behind and focusing on his own life's journey. And also, I love his story specifically because he's not following the traditional mold that society is usually put on us. We go through school, we go through college, and then we go work our corporate job until we turn 60, 65, 70, and then we retire and live out the rest of our days. Nico's trying to do something a little bit different. So with that all being said, let's jump into today's episode. Nico, thanks for joining us, man. I had the pleasure of hopping on your show just a couple of weeks ago, and it went great. I said, Nico, you got to hop on mine so we can beat the bat over here too.
Well, pleasure having you on my show, and thank you for having me here. It's great to get back with you, and I'm looking forward to talking about the life that we're building.
Heck yeah. Just as a reference, so anyone, if you enjoyed today's episode, you enjoy the conversation with Nico, you want to hear a little bit more about his background. His show, it's called Duel the Day. Nico, I'm assuming they can find you on all the traditional platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, everything in between. Tell us a little bit about that podcast, why you got started, and then we'll jump into your story.
So my cousin Tyler and I started the podcast because I think we both felt that we had a message to share with the younger generation. We've just had a lot of unique but not so unique experiences in life, experiences I think a lot of people can connect with. And so we wanted to build kind of originally a repository of these ideas, experiences, perspectives, what have you, to share with the younger generation and prepare them for eventually encountering similar stuff themselves. So that was kind of the idea.
And since doing it, you've been running the show for, I want to say 6 months, but I could be pulling that out of nowhere right now. How long has it been going?
So, no, we started off a little while ago. I think the original idea started before the pandemic, so like late 2019, and we've been doing podcasts and recordings ever since then, but not anything consistent. Our focus is not to have the podcast generate an income. Like, yes, if that happens, that is great. But both him and I have our own kind of commitments and priorities in life. So we're kind of doing the podcast as we go.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I want to jump into your story a little bit now. Having known you for a few months now, you have a very interesting story that the listeners on the Get Over Yourself podcast will appreciate more than the typical individual might. Let's start back all the way on your physical side. I know a big portion of your life was dedicated around the sport of football. Yeah. And that kind of took up a lot of your time, a lot of your talent. Let's jump back into high school when you played football. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how it led to playing in college as well.
Well, I fell in love with the sport in part because I was actually bullied as a kid and I didn't really know what to do. So I found football and fell in love with it. I started lifting in middle school. I got into high school. I actually moved states from Texas to Tennessee and played all 4 years at my high school. On different teams, not varsity. I'm not that good. But I was just a bigger kid at the time. So I was an offensive lineman. And just through that, I was like, I thought that I at least wanted to experience college football because I had seen it. I felt like I could do it. And so I looked around, and the only school that I could get a decent chance to play at was in East Tennessee called Tusculum College, which is a D2 school. And when you're talking about the physical side, that's where I started to notice that football wasn't for me, because I showed up at this D2 university. I'm about 6'1", 6'2", and at the time I was close to 300 pounds, and I was the smallest offensive lineman in the group. And so I was like, okay, we're gonna switch this up a little bit. And I started losing weight because of that, just because I felt like I was a smaller person living in a bigger body. And just changed up my diet. I was still doing a ton of exercise with the team. I lost 30 pounds in the first month, and then gradually took it off to where I'm at now, which is around 200, a little under 200. So
was your coach at that point, did you tell him, I don't know if this is for me? How'd you still work out with the team if you're losing all the weight? They're like, dude, you got to be beefing up, not losing weight here.
So that's where I lucked out, actually. So I not only was an offensive lineman, but I was a specialist as well. I was a long snapper. And so I just switched to full-time long snapping, and
there you go.
I was able to lose the weight and people weren't yelling at me. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I have the countless stories of my buddies going throughout their college careers and whatnot where, they get the coach whipping at them because they're not making weight perfectly, but,
Oh yeah.
um, one interesting thing that you mentioned was when you were younger, you actually got bullied, and I feel
Yep.
like maybe at the time you weren't quite as big, maybe you weren't as strong as you were when you started actually getting in the heart of football, but you never really picture, at least in the stereotypical scheme of, a youth's world here in the United States, I never really picture an offensive lineman getting bullied. You're a big dude in high school. You were one of the guys that
Yeah.
everyone was like, "Whoa, watch out of his way." What's the story behind that?
I think I always felt a little out of place growing up, just because my dad is from New York State. His family is Irish and Czechoslovakian, so that side, like, I appear very white, so I have that appearance. But then my mom is from South America, and so I understood a lot of the Latin culture. It was a big part of my life. I went to Colombia many times, and I just felt out of place in at certain moments when I was young. And so I think because of that, I was a little shy. People didn't see me do any athletics in the school, or at least with anyone that was there. And so, like, I guess I was a prime suspect to get bullied, I guess. So, but then, yeah, I mean, I actually played a year or two in middle school with some of the guys that I bullied, and I think that's partially why it helped stop. Because, like, at least I don't know if everyone's the same way, but you become a different person on the football field. You can be very nice, cordial, kind person off the field, but when you strap it on, like, we're going to war.
Mhm. Yeah, and I know that's a lot of stories you hear today too. This topic is neither here nor there, but just because you actually were influenced it when you were younger, some of the best practices that I have seen from friends that I encountered when I was younger as well was getting out there on the sports field and meeting them where they were at. And bullies,
Yeah.
there's always so many things that they're shadowing behind their life. Maybe it's a messed up father or a messed up home
Yeah.
that they're kind of distracting themselves from, and they bring out their anger towards other people. And so one of the best ways you can kind of match their energy, not in a rude or combative way, is just meeting them where they're at. And oftentimes that comes from sports.
Yep. Very true. Sports
Yeah,
are a
but
great equalizer.
yeah, yeah. Great equalizer, great life lessons that come from it. That
Yep.
would be an entire episode we could jump onto. But I want to jump over to your corporate career now. So go through college, play D2 football. What'd you get your degree in, and where was the world pushing you when you were getting that degree?
So that's a very, most like every other thing that's happened to me, somewhat unconventional. So I went to Tusculum University to play football, and then I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be able to fulfill the academic needs that I was looking for at that university. Even though they're one of the oldest universities in the country, they didn't have a Spanish program at the time that I was there. I mean, I was at least looking to get credits and take the class for easy grades or something.
Yeah.
And so I moved to the University of Tennessee, and originally was getting a business or a marketing degree. That did not happen. So I changed my majors, and then I think a year or one semester before I was set to actually graduate, I got a job offer to go and work for a company in New Jersey.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, it actually worked out. I was able to go take the job, finish my classes online, get a business management degree, and kind of figure out what the next steps were. And I quickly realized that the Northeast and New Jersey and working in this environment wasn't for me. So I came back to Tennessee, and that's where I ended up at Mars Pet Care. My dad worked there in a totally separate department at the time, so I at least had a little foot in the door when it came to the interview process. But pretty pretty rigid, not rigid, rigorous interview process. But was there for a couple of years and learned a lot about how companies manage certain situations, efficiencies, qualities, things like that. But I ran into a lot of problems with just politics, people butting heads for no reason, people caring about their position over the efficiency of the work. And so I found my way out and into a different company. And I think I made the mistake that a lot of people make, thinking that I'm going to switch jobs and the grasses are going to be greener on the other side. And really, that I don't think that's the case. I think you're going to find similar issues across all companies in corporate America, and that's
Yeah.
what I ran into. Just people like, a quick example, my boss told me to do something, call a client or something along those lines, and just tell them what was happening. I wasn't taking any orders, nothing along those lines. So I make that phone call. Not 10 minutes later, someone from my own company calls and chews me out for making that phone call. And I'm thinking, my boss told me to do this. We're both on the same team, are we not? We work for the same. What is the issue? And that was the first of many issues that pushed me out of that job. And I went from that to getting the life coaching certification, and that's where I started learning about that. Eventually, I got a job at the state of Tennessee, and I was using that to sustain myself, just because I missed the waves when it came to selling crypto, and so I wasn't able to support myself like I am now. But I knew that working in those types of jobs, corporate America, pushing for a higher salary and a higher prestige or position or whatever it is, was not for me. So I took a consistent job at the state, and I've been kind of building this life that I'm living now ever since. So
Awesome. And I want to highlight that specific note. You went from a couple different companies where originally you get your foot in the door. Like you said, you had an old man working there. And so that was kind of your in. And frankly, a lot of people, when they graduate college, they don't know what they want to do. They don't know if the
yeah.
job they're entering is even in the field they want to continue working in. There's a study just done recently. The United States Labor Department just posted the results of this, where individuals who just graduate college, so anywhere between 21 to 25, 26, somewhere in there, when people are finishing up school, they are 98% likely not to have the same job 5 years after they graduate. 98%. And I just thought that was nuts.
Wow.
And obviously I'm assuming most of these people that keep those jobs, it's ones that they already had ins to. They were riding that little ladder, like you said, and they were trying to build up the ranks inside the same
Right.
company. But yeah, over 98% weren't holding
That
the same
surprises
job.
me.
It's
I thought
nuts, isn't it?
I definitely did not expect it to be that high.
It's crazy. And so all these people are recognizing that now after I graduate, I jump into something, because as soon as you graduate, you got student loans, you got real life bills you got to start paying. But then you also hop in a thing and you say, wait, am I actually enjoying this? And I think one thing, Nico, how old are you? How old are you?
I'm 35.
35. So you'll understand this too. I think anyone in their 40s, maybe a little bit older, maybe even some of the younger 40s still understand this a little bit. But when our parents were growing up, they graduated school and they stuck with the job and they were there. That was their life, and they kind of rode that
Yep.
wave. But I feel like a little bit of the millennial Gen Z type attitudes is, if I don't like what I'm doing, I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to try and find something new. But the key point in all this, the reason why I brought all this up, is what you said, is sometimes you go into a career, you think it's going to go great, and inevitably things happen. You don't necessarily love who you're working with. The company culture might not be perfect. And you think, okay, if I could just get to a new situation, if I could get to a new career, a new job, it's all going to be perfect. And as you know better than anyone, that is a huge falsity. It's
Yeah.
not a real concept. And
Big
so
time.
what would you tell people who are in that boat right now, that are trying to figure out what they want to do, but they also might not love exactly what they're working on right now, and they might want to switch it up in the next few years?
I think that's a great question, and it comes with a lot of circumstances. So, what I mean by that is every person's situation is going to be different. Their financial circumstances may be different, where they're at in their career. And so, what I would start off by saying is this: always do what makes you happy. It doesn't matter what it is. If your entire family hates gardening, but you want to be a gardener, be a gardener. Like that, it doesn't matter what it is. Pursue your happiness. And the other side of things is, depending on your financial situation, maybe the person listening says, "Hey, I can do this now. I can invest in the things I want to do, pursue my passions, quit my job, and go down that road." Or the person may have debts, like you're saying, or other things that they're paying for, and they have to plan for something. And to that person, I would say this: start the plan today. Start to figure out how much you can save, what you can invest in, what you can learn over the course of the 2, 3, 4, 5 years it may take you to build up, get out of that debt, and start the new thing that you want to do. But you have to start with those baby steps. I think a lot of people get caught up in the whole instant gratification
Mm,
world that we're in, and I think they need to realize that with any type of great change is usually going to have some type of great sacrifice as well, whether it's raising a family, starting a business, going out on your own, going against what your family tells you. There's a lot of risk and sacrifice that's involved with all of that. So if you're pursuing your happiness, you're taking calculated, smart risks, then that's what I would urge you to do. It doesn't matter who you work for. As long as your values are aligned, you're doing something that makes you happy. That's what I would urge everyone to do.
yeah. And going back to that study I just was mentioning a little bit ago, I don't want to sit here and say that if you're unhappy in your workplace, there isn't some place that could treat you a little bit better. There isn't some
Sure.
place where you can find more joy. Obviously, that can be the case. And heck, inside of that 98% who had different jobs, it wasn't necessarily completely switching their careers or even the same company. They might have switched roles into different departments. That falls into that
Right.
same category there. And at the end of the day, Nico nor myself are able to sit there and say, you're going to be happy here, you're not going to be happy here.
No.
That's up for you to decide. But what Nico just mentioned, where you have to sit down and have one of these conversations with yourself and say, all right, I got to plan out what my next steps are. That could be a very tough conversation, but it's one that we all need to have. My wife and I, we try and have these conversations once a month. What are the directions we're headed? We include it in our little budgeting session we
It's a
do
great
once a month.
habit.
It's a great habit, and it gives us direction on where we're going inside of our financial life, our spiritual life, our marriage. Everything that we're doing, we're able to sit down and kind of have a one-on-one session and say, all right, this is where we're sitting right now, and this is where we're going. And if we don't like the direction we're going, newsflash, guys, we can change that. We can be the steward of
Yep.
our own journey. And Nico, you did that yourself. You were on this journey, and instead of doing the typical lifestyle where you sit back and you say, all right, this is my life for the next 40 years, I'm going to do something different.
Yeah, the other thing I want to add to all of that is I think I have a very different mindset when it comes to work and why we do it. For me, a big part of why I left the working world was because my values simply didn't align. Like the way I think about the working world is you can tell me whatever you want. You can bash me, you can do whatever. But if in doing so, our jobs are becoming more efficient, we're spending less time at work, we're getting things done better and faster, then that's okay. Sometimes people get aggravated, upset. That's fine. But too many people take those things personally and then try and attack you back. And they spend time doing this whole verbal gymnastics, and you have to be worried about what you say, and then nothing ever gets done. Like if we just focus on the efficiency of work, then things would go a lot faster and people wouldn't care about what job they had or the status that they had or the promotion that they had. And so for me, that's the core piece of what I found in lots of other places. And I personally can't handle that because it's a waste of time. What I noticed was I would come up with an idea to a manager, they would say no. And then 30, 60 days later, they would implement that idea and take it as their own. Or they would just ignore the idea in the first place. And then 6 months to a year later, we have to come back around and say, well, remember that idea that you had? We actually have to implement it now. And I'm just like, we just wasted all of that time. And that happens everywhere in
Yep.
corporate America. So I can't handle that. So I had to get out of there and do something myself.
Yeah. That's the fun thing about running a startup right now is I got my poster and everything behind us. We every single day when we walk into the office, we have no clue the direction. I shouldn't say no clue. We have a roadmap, but every single day there's something that changes. But that's the
Yeah.
fun part of it to me. If a new idea is brought to light and we want to try it out, this is the time to do it. Not and I understand where they're coming from. These big corporations, they have a system that works and they don't like changing, and it's worked, and that's why they're a big company. That's why they can hire a lot of employees. But at the same time, you got to still be willing to implement some fun practices and just put yourself out there and take a little risk on. But Nico, I
Yeah.
want to jump over real quick as we're coming up on the close of the episode today. I want to talk a little bit about your crypto journey. You're obviously
Sure.
a big proponent of investing in crypto. I want to hear why. A lot of people still are a little bit scared. You got the Elizabeth Warrens of the world trying to tell you that it's an evil scam. Tell me why you're a big fan of it and why you think people should start investing today.
Well, first, before I get into any detail, I want to point people over to my crypto monologue because I go into a lot more detail on this. You can check that out on our website. But the short story is I've been investing in cryptocurrency, using cryptocurrency for the past decade. I've read hundreds of white papers, which are the technical descriptions of how cryptocurrencies work. And over that time, I've invested, traded, tried different things, and kept up with all the regulatory side of things too. And the big reason why I've enjoyed this and I think that crypto is the future is because of how specifically Bitcoin is structured and how it works. In my opinion, it's the best form of money that humans have created, just because of all the technical little details. Right, we have a problem today with inflation.
Even though we don't necessarily know who created it, right?
Yeah, it's pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. Don't maybe the CIA knows, but that's a different episode. But like right now, we're experiencing problems with inflation. That's because the Federal Reserve can just print more dollars, right? Simple supply and demand economics. If you have billions of apples, apples are going to be worth very little. If you have 10 apples, they're going to be worth a lot. Same thing happens with currency, and Bitcoin doesn't work that way. There's a maximum supply. It's a whole mining thing. And so now with the security and how Bitcoin works, it also invites other cryptocurrencies to be made and things like that. And honestly, that's where I think like regulatory things are going to help out, take out the bad actors and things like that. Because that is where some of the skepticism comes into play. They see people get scammed, they see bad coins, and yeah, those are out there because governments are late in regulating this. Basically, it's the Wild West. There's millions, tens of thousands of cryptocurrencies that have been created, and not all of them are good. So, just like with any investment, read before you invest. And the last thing I'll say here is don't always listen to what you hear in the mainstream media. I'll give you an example. Jamie Dimon, the founder of JP Morgan or CEO or whatever, in 2017 was saying that Bitcoin was a fraud, it's a scam, all this stuff. At the exact same time, his company was buying shares of Bitcoin. And so that doesn't make any sense. And when you actually think about it from a business perspective, a lot of the big players in the financial world that are already established, they work off of the value of the dollar. And so a totally separate currency coming to prominence is actually bad for business unless they're already involved in it, if that makes sense. Like all of the money that they make is in cash investments. And so if a cryptocurrency product comes up, they might lose money if people start investing in that and they're not already involved. So there's a lot of subtleties and behind the scenes things that causes a lot of that skepticism. But I think cryptocurrency is definitely going to be the way of the future. And last quick comment here is I heard recently that the only currency that AI will be able to use is cryptocurrency. Now, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's interesting to think about with everything happening in the AI world. If those AI assistants, bots, whatever, are only able to use cryptocurrency for transactions, what does the crypto world look like in 5 to 10 years?
Definitely. That's where the world's headed. So, Nico, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate everything that you shared with us today. Everyone, once again, if you want to go check out Nico's show, Duel the Day, I'll link that in the episode description down below, down in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's conversation, once again, go check out Nico. I'll also list all of his websites and everything so you can go give him a follow over there. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to leave us a 5-star review and share it with somebody who you think would benefit from hearing these words. You guys are my best form of marketing. So with that all being said, I appreciate you, and I'll see you guys next week.